May the 4th be with you, as they say, and may the May 4th balance updates to Marvel Snap be with you as well. We've got 3 new over-the-air changes. These are the stats-only balance changes that are happening currently weekly during Marvel Snap, and we're going to run through each of these and the impact I think they might have on the Marvel Snap metagame. And I might even show some deck lists too to get you experimenting with these cards right off the bat. So let's read through this. As we're working on this update, the Marvel Snap metagame has a good amount of variety and players experimenting with new strategies. So we won't be rocking the boat too much. Last week featured 4 changes we're still waiting to fully evaluate. So this week, we'll just include a few small buffs to cards that could use a little love. And first and foremost is Orka, a card I love playing. I've spotlighted a few different Orka decks around these parts recently, and I think this is a pretty significant buff. Orka going from 6'9" to 6'11", card text remaining the same as it's going to do in over-the-air changes. So that's a big change. That makes him a 6'16". when played on his own, which there were so many instances playing Orka, I felt like he was just a couple power short here and there. I think I literally remember him even going face up against a Destroyer at one point, and it's like 14 for Orka versus 15 for Destroyer. That sucks, but now it's 16. That's a matchup he can win, and I think that's really going to change some breakpoints here and there. This isn't very complicated. Orka released low, consistently one of our least played cards, and weak on win rate. He's especially vulnerable to splash damage in a metagame where being able to counter Galactus has a higher priority for players, so the solve should clearly involve raising his floor. A design team for the card's weakest outcome, a design term for the card's weakest outcome. Just buffing his base power also keeps his ongoing symmetrical, with Namor's further focusing on their fishy feud. We don't expect to see Orka suddenly start tearing up the competitive ranks, but it's free for us to make him stronger. Yeah, it is worth noting that this also just makes him like pretty solid as a 6'11" sometimes too. Before I was often playing him as an America Chavez, right, where it's just a 6'9", but this keeps him closer to things like Magneto and Hulk and other just high-powered 6-cost cards, even if you don't hit his upside. So pretty nice here that I don't think Orka becomes like a great card or anything, but again, these Orka decks I've spotlighted that can work, that can do things, I think just got a little bit better. For instance, here's an Orka deck I played not too long ago. This clearly has its roots in the Electro Sandman camp, which is a deck that has lost a little bit of power since Sandman got nerfed, but this also has some ongoing synergies and stuff here with Namor and Orka, who both now have been buffed up, and I'm excited to revisit this one. I wouldn't, go out of your way to play this or think you're going to climb a ton with this deck or anything like that, but this might be a good starting point if you're looking to experiment a little bit with Orka in his new form, giving you some interesting, one-to-one gameplay moments where you're both locked down to a single card thanks to Sandman, and now your Orka is probably just going to be bigger than whatever your opponent's thing might be as well. So moving on to the Collector. Collector is going from a 2-1 to a 2-2. So pretty small buff here, I would say, for the Collector. Back in the day, Collector used to get +2 power off of his effect, which now that felt like a really, really big deal. That made the card kind of insane, I thought. Just starting with 1 extra power here doesn't feel like a significant difference to me. They write, those of us who were playing in the beta no doubt remember the glory days of the Collector, as I just recalled, and the nerf that was merited when brought him in line as an on-curve play in some discard and Devil Dinosaur decks. However, he's been largely squeezed out of these archetypes since without finding a new home. Hopefully he'll be a bit more competitive with other 2-cost cards at this rate and start earning those slots back or showing up in new decks like Bounce. And I think that's absolutely a possibility. Again, raising a floor always helps. If I'm getting 2-4 out of the Collector instead of 2-3 off of a couple card returns, that suddenly, okay, he's in that lizard sort of territory. In other words, his expected result becomes more in line with other 2-cost plays. You don't have to do quite as much work to catch him up to other cards. I don't think that's suddenly going to change the world or anything, though. I don't think any decks really suddenly come into the forefront or something with the Collector. It's more about occasionally the Collector might find an extra home here or there because of this change. He doesn't suddenly become a great card once again. As far as a Collector deck I'd like to try, I think I'd like to revisit him in Bounce. The potential to add a lot of cards with Bounce is pretty high. You've also got, Moon Girl synergies Even some stuff like discard can also support collector, so a few different angles, but this is an archetype I'd want to see once again, just bouncing all these cards back to hand, scaling up that collector alongside Bishop and Angela. Then you've also got Hitmonkey for a power bounce as well, or power spike as well. So a few different ways for this deck to gain power on top of all these really fun bounce effects. And I'll put, of course, links to these decks down in the description below if you want to grab these deck codes. And then finally here we have Luke Cage going from a 2-1 to a 2-2. Same exact change as we're seeing for the collector. Again, a pretty minimal change here. Luke Cage is already getting a little bit of play here and there, not a ton, but there are a handful of different like Sarah toxic decks that are running Luke Cage. This is probably just going to make those feel a little bit better. The two most popular decks with Luke are middling performers on the numbers and the Surge and Super Scroll, plus the buff to Enchantress, and both indirectly weakened him. We actually considered testing 3 power briefly. Wow. But recalled how the Hazmat buff to 2 power months ago killed a delightful Cerebro 1 deck. This change thus restores that combo as an interesting option for Cerebro 2, since Luke protects that deck from a handful of meddlesome locations as well. Oh, that's a cool idea, putting this in C2 now as a 2-2. I think there were already some running it technically as a protector, but now he also gets the buff, which is cool. The added power makes Luke more viable as a tech card in other decks, which might come in handy if Afflict strategies reach a new high in the near future. That is a reference to High Evolutionary and all these Affliction cards that are going to reduce the power of your opponent's stuff. So prepping Luke Cage perhaps for the new meta is pretty cool, and then also enabling him in a couple different archetypes sounds like a nice change too. I guess that's pretty significant. I guess that's true for collector. Oh no, you can't run collector in a C2 deck. No, never mind. Not true for collector, but true for Luke Cage. So yeah, here's the Luke Cage deck I just found on Untapped, already in a Cerebro 2 list, which, as I teased, I think is a thing people were already doing just to protect it. But now Luke Cage also getting the Cerebro buff, potentially getting, like +4, +5 stats here. Is actually pretty insane. It's now a 2-7 instead of a 2-1, while still serving the utility here for that Hazmat and to protect against any particularly unfavorable location nerfs and afflictions and such. So yeah, this could be a really, really fun way to try out Luke Cage. I think I'm going to give this one a go. I don't play much Cerebro, honestly. That's always been Snapster's domain, but this might be my excuse to break out a fun Cerebro deck and see here how Luke Cage can feel. So there you go. That's it. Thanks for tuning in. We're still gathering data on these OTA updates and observing the impact on your play experience. So we appreciate all the passion and feedback around these changes. We don't have a decision yet on whether or not the cadence of these balance changes will continue at a weekly pace through more of the summer. So thanks in advance for your patience on that front. And we look forward to communicating more soon. I do like it. These are changes that just add a little freshness to the game without doing anything crazy or rocking the boat too much. Even just 1 or 2 per week, I think would still go pretty far. So I do hope they maintain this. I mean, I guess if they run out of stuff that's reasonable to change, that could cause a problem. But I don't think that'll be the case because the meta moves, new cards are always coming in. I think there's always going to be something to tweak here and there. And I really appreciate these insights they offer as well. So curious to hear your thoughts on these changes. We'll try out some of these cards in some decks over this weekend, maybe get some videos out trying this stuff out. That said, look forward to that. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.